Hello, and welcome to Spotlight On, the podcast that brings together business leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts covering a range of topics. I'm Nicholas Barton, founder and CEO of the Barton Partnership. We're an award-winning executive recruitment and consulting solutions firm providing permanent search and independent consulting services across strategy, sustainability and M&A, data and analytics, and transformation and change.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Spotlight On. I'm Alex Dyke, a director in the Barton Partnership's professional services practice, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Essex, a senior partner at Wipro Consulting. Mike leads the European Talent and Change consulting practice, delivering digital transformation programs for a portfolio of global clients. The practice itself specializes in the people side of change, including change management, future workforce services, and learning and development. Mike is responsible for the practice's strategy, P&L, sales, recruitment, and team well-being. With a previous background at PwC and EY, Mike has a strong track record in digital transformation, having led global programs in AI, technology, ERP, and organizational change. Mike, great to have you with me today. Thank you very much for joining me on this discussion, and I'm really excited to get into the topic of leading through complexity with you. Perhaps, if you like, you could start by sharing with us a little bit about your leadership journey and what led you to your current role as the European leader for talent and change at Wipro.
Thanks, Alex, and great to be here. Well, it's certainly not been a straight line for me. My leadership journey started in my early 20s. I was in a sales career and I was actually leading a team of people who were all older than me. So they were all at the time I was early 20s, they were 30s, 40s, 50s. And I actually found that really quite difficult because I didn't really know how I should be as a leader. And when I look back, I think I was trying to be someone else, right? So I was probably trying to be this kind of alpha male model that I thought was the right leadership style. And actually, it didn't really work for me. And as I kind of matured and got more experienced, there came a point where I decided I'm just going to be myself. I know I've got strengths and weaknesses, but I thought I'm just going to be myself. And those kind of skills developed as I joined PwC, then EY, and now Wipro. And really, I've understood that the real leadership skill is not just leading the team, but it's understanding the individuals, showing an interest in what they're doing inside of work and outside of work, and then adapting my style either to meet their needs or the situation's needs. So being flexible, and also try and lead by example. So demonstrating I've got the energy, desire, and to roll the sleeves up, because I do believe in that kind of authentic leadership style, and actions speak louder than words. So that's kind of sums up my style and journey to date.
Thanks very much. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about VUCA leadership, which is something you and I have discussed offline several times now. Perhaps you could introduce this topic to us from your perspective and tell us a little bit about the guiding principles.
VUCA is a really interesting topic. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's an area I got really interested in because I've studied this at depth at the Henley Business School. And I think you can sum it up. There was one image that module left me with, which is when you sometimes see on like a David Attenborough Nature program, a group of starlings, when they come home to roost at night, you see these great numbers of starlings and they're moving around in the sky, and there's actually no pattern to it. And that's actually called a murmuration. And that actually describes perhaps the VUCA world that we're all living in at the moment with, and we've seen it with examples of COVID, then the hybrid working, now the emergence of AI. It's very unpredictable and uncertain. And that image has kind of stayed with me because I think it represents it very well. In terms of the principles, vision, I would think, is one major principle, as in leaders throughout the uncertainty have got to have a clear vision of where they're aiming for. They've got to understand the world that they're living in really, really well, and the complexity. So in the consulting world that I am, I've done it for probably 25 years now. So I really feel like I've got a good understanding of consulting, and therefore, as a leader, I would bring that knowledge to the table. And then the third principle is around adaptability. So it's ever changing, so you can't be too fixed. So good to have a direction of travel, but very, very open to moving. In terms of essential qualities for a leader in that VUCA world, strategic thinking. So leaders have got to be able to think strategically, always got to be one step ahead, try and anticipate what the trends and the challenges are, and then maybe adapt the strategy as that becomes slightly clearer. I think resilience is a huge quality for a leader today. Withstanding stress, recovering from setbacks, being persistent in the face of all these challenges, being able to look after yourself and be fresh and energetic each day, despite the challenges, is really, really key. And then maybe the last quality I would say is emotional intelligence. So managing your own emotions. So you might have come off a really tough call or a really tough meeting, and then you're dealing with a younger person in the team as a mentoring capacity, and not kind of bringing that residue of stress, etc., from the previous meeting into that mentee meeting. Have the EQ to understand that and adapt quickly in today's world. So those are the qualities and principles.
Thank you, Mike. And that probably leads us quite nicely into our next question, is around challenges. What do you see are the biggest challenges facing consulting leaders today?
It's a good question, and I think the challenges are huge, and I've seen it change over time as well. I think the biggest challenge now is consulting leaders are expected to sell and deliver. And that in itself is a full-time job, selling and delivering. So it means winning clients, then delivering on client work, and then looking at the next opportunity to sell. And I think that's changed. So I would go back a few years when I looked at some of the partners. It was more about, once you got to that position, it was more about managing the team, and less of the client side and less of the selling. On top of that, sell and deliver mantra, the leaders have also got to cope with all the operational stuff of the team. So that means recruitment, staffing, running the bench, making sure the revenue numbers are there, looking at the margin. So I think it's a very all-encompassing job that is extremely demanding. You've got all of that, and then I think it's about staying current. So that's a very busy week, if you like, straight as it is. But then, as we talked about earlier in VUCA and looking ahead with the challenges and things like AI, how do you maintain or create enough space in your week to self-develop and learn about new technologies that are coming, and then make the connection between that new technology, AI, and then the work you and your team are doing? Very all-encompassing. And interestingly, I read an article this week, in addition to all of that, around sort of onshore and offshore. So, clients wanting a competitive cost for them. One way of doing that for consulting companies is to have a greater onshore-offshore mix, which can mean, in our case, in Wipro, it would be the India offshore model. And then managing those teams, and then the recruitment and perhaps the slightly different staffing of your team as you move forward, and how you start building that into your strategies and propositions. So I think there are absolutely multiple challenges. It's a tough role, but a rewarding one at the same time.
Throughout your career, but also currently, you've led large global delivery teams for clients. How do you now lead a global team effectively, considering we've got different cultures, generations, time zones? How did you make that make sense?
Yes, it's, again, a good question. I mean, first of all, I love that aspect in my role as a leader, that cultural aspect, because I love learning. I always have learned, I've done a lot of traveling, and I've always enjoyed going to new places and learning about new people. And then the challenge of leading a team with lots of different cultures is quite tough. I mean, a recent global project I led had teams in the US, UK, Belgium, Germany, and India. So it was the full spread. It's very difficult because, of course, as soon as you start a project, it's just absolutely full on, and then there are deliverables to hit, and understanding the problem, multiple teams. And we might well have sort of 500 people on a program, of which we might be a team of 20. So as well as understanding the scope of what we're doing and how all the other work streams are interacting, we have to try and make time for us at the beginning. And it's always difficult doing that, but always try and carve out some time at the beginning to get the team together. And usually it's virtually, to understand a bit more about the team. It's usually multi-generational. This example I'm talking about was, we had sort of 25 to sort of early 60s in that particular example. As it happened, one of the leads was based in the US. And he was prepared to actually start his day at 4 a.m. his time, which was about 9 or 10 a.m. Europe time. It was one of my leads, and he led by example, if you like, and was happy to do that. And I think other people sort of thought, wow, he's really dedicated to this. And then with that and the time zones across India, we were able to give a massive coverage to the client. It didn't all go that smoothly. So there was definitely tension in the team around ways of working. Obviously with US, Europe, India, there's very different cultural differences. And we had a few challenges in the first month where the style wasn't quite right and some people felt they weren't being heard. So we all got together. There were some one-on-one conversations, and then we talked about that example. We were quite open as a team, and after about 2 months, we gelled really well. So I think I would say 1, carve out time at the beginning of the global program team, and 2, it's not going to happen straight away. It's not going to all gel straight. It will take time. So like I say, in that case, it took us 2 months to probably, what I would say, get quite well-oiled machine going as a team.
So the COVID-19 pandemic, that's clearly reshaped how we work, but more importantly, it's reshaped our expectations of our own employers. How do you foster togetherness and collaboration in an increasingly remote and multi-generational workforce, such as the one that you've just spoken about?
Again, it's tough. It was forced upon us in some ways, wasn't it? In 2020, 21, I run the European talent and change team here for Wipro. So I've got a number of people in lots of different countries. If I take the hybrid working, Wipro, we were quite well set up for that in terms of the technology and Teams and video calls. So that worked quite well. The hybrid working, about how many days you want to come into the office, we've gone from like almost 4 or 5 days in the office or client site to hybrid. Now that's been really interesting. You've got people who actually get energy from people, and I like being in the office, say 2 or 3 days a week. Yet I've got people in the team who find it very energy draining being in the office and can't get on with their work. So you've got to be cognizant there's a big spectrum of needs and wants. And I think it's about finding a balance. I think it's more around looking at the outputs of people's work and judging that rather than time in the office. We try and say, for people who are within reach of London, where our office is, we'd like to be in the office once a week, right, and that's generally a Thursday. That's worked quite well. We do every 2 months, we will have a hybrid event. We call it an innovation lab, where we get the whole team together, and that's in the office, but also hybrid for people dialing in different countries, where we discuss the latest innovation type areas like AI and how we get that into our offerings, and trying to build that sense of togetherness, even though we're not there all the time. And I think we've just about found the right balance. But again, it's taken about a year or so, and in some cases still slightly work in progress. The second part of the question was around the sort of multi-generational aspect. And again, in my team, I've got Gen Zs, millennials, Gen X's and baby boomers, actually. So I've got the full spectrum in the team. And I don't want to generalize too much, but there are differences. If I look at Gen Zs, and I believe I can talk about Gen Zs because I have 2 of them my daughters in the house living with me. They're very interested in purpose and meaningful work. And that's a question I get an awful lot, particularly from younger people when I'm interviewing them, is, what is Wipro's purpose? Now, fortunately, Wipro does have a great purpose, because 66% of its economic interest goes to the Premji Foundation, which is a philanthropic foundation for charity. What I've also noticed is, and they're more likely to make a move quickly. So if they're not happy about either the work conditions or the work they're doing, or the purpose of the work is not aligning with them, they will move, and often with no job to go to. That was a learning for me. So I think that's around Gen Z. Millennials and Gen X's, if I group those together, tend to have grown up with kind of long hours, being in the office 4 or 5 days, traveling and staying away from family without questioning in it so much. I probably count myself in that bracket around accepted it as part of work. So, for example, when I joined a company, I had a 8-month-old baby and a 4-year-old at home, and I was told on Monday you've got to go away 4 days a week for 12 months, and I kind of did it, and I found that extremely tough, and I didn't really want to do it, but I didn't feel I could say no or challenge it at the time. I think in today's world that there would be a conversation about that type of working arrangement. So yeah, I think overall the hybrid working and the multi-generational workforce, it is a big challenge. And I think for leaders, it's about no matter what generation you're from, you've just got to be very open and understanding of other people's wants and needs and just try and get the right balance for your team.
It's clear that consulting is a tough business. What do you think are the strategies that leaders can employ to remain effective and resilient amid just so many uncertainties?
Maybe I start that, Alex, by when I was growing up in leadership and I looked up and looked at the leaders, I saw a lot of burnout. I saw a lot of divorces. I saw a lot of unhealthy looking people. Obviously, that's not a good recipe for success, right? For me personally, to be a good leader, I've got to be in good shape. And I kind of call it more like a corporate athlete. Professional athletes really look after themselves. And in some sense, we've talked about the demanding nature of consulting at any level and particularly leadership level. And I do think that kind of corporate athlete analogy really works. So in terms of nutrition, exercise and sleep, that's what athletes would do. And that's what we've got to be cognizant of. And it is so easy to let all of that slide, really easy. It happened to me. So during COVID, I remember I felt really under pressure. This was recently, say 2 or 3 years ago. And I was sitting at my desk at 8 a.m. and I was still there at 8 p.m., 9 p.m. And I'd hardly gone out in the day. Rarely went out in the day. And I thought I was doing okay. I thought that's what I had to do. I was adapting myself. And then someone said to me, "Mike, you look really, really tired. Are you okay?" And of course I said, "Of course I'm fine. I'm fine. But actually I wasn't fine. And I also think the individual themselves is the last person to realize they might be going down that kind of road. And it kind of a bit of a wake up call for me who kind of knew this anyway. And it happened to me. So now I'm really quite conscious of what I eat. I do quite a lot of exercise anyway. So I like to commute to the office when I go in to say two or three times a week. I will usually bike into the office. And sleep wise, I try and average about 7 hours of sleep. Fortunately, I'm a good sleeper, so that does happen. I also spend time with friends and family. And during that period of where I was working kind of too hard in COVID, my daughter was like sort of 1 year away from GCSEs. And I started to feel terribly, terribly guilty about not spending enough time with her and helping her with her exam prep. So I had to give myself a real talking to then and got myself back on track, because it is so easy just to continue down that road. I think a lot of people identify with that. You get into a sort of bit of a treadmill with it, bit of a routine, and it's not a good one. And ever so slowly, all these things we should be doing go out the window. So, I don't know whether you've experienced that.
I think that's a lovely answer. And it's interesting that actually, if I'd asked somebody like you that question, what strategies can a leader employ to remain effective, even 5 years ago, the answer would have been detailed to-do list, thorough planning, look at your to-do list the night before, make sure you've got all the support around you, make sure you're staffed appropriately. And I love that your answer wasn't any of that. It was actually, you need to look after yourself first so you can effectively be the best version of yourself for the people that you lead, but also look after your family at home. That answer alone actually probably underlines the shift in how we interact with our workplaces now. So I'm really glad you said that. And also in terms of development, that probably leads into our next question, which is actually around leadership development. And there seems to be, from people that I speak to, like yourself, but also clients who are looking to hire and chief people officers as well, there generally seems to be a perceived investment gap in leadership development. Leaders are always expected to join and have all of the answers from day one. We always hear about being able to hit the ground running, start a fast start, be successful quickly, but it's not always the case. And how do you think organizations can proactively address this gap? And ultimately, what steps do you think could be taken to better support and ultimately retain leaders? Because you and I both know that there is so much pressure to get up and running quickly, sometimes unnecessarily so. And if it doesn't work immediately, then people start to panic, and then that affects retention. And retention is really what builds successful hiring stories.
I totally agree. In any role I've ever started, you're expected to hit the ground running. It also comes a little bit, Alex, I think there's something around whether leaders are born and made, quite a big debate, continuing debate on that. you will get some leaders who naturally will be better than others, who would naturally be able to adapt and perhaps draw on something within them. We've all seen the person who can kind of walk into a room, or see a leader that just seems to have got it. I don't think I'm one of those people. I think I'm one of the people who have to work at it. And I think it's something that organizations need to improve on, if I'm honest. I've worked in quite a few organizations, and probably in a few of them, it's just not been there enough. It's often a stated desire to help leaders, but then when push comes to shove, maybe it's a tough economic time and there isn't quite the budget to do enough. And I do think organizations miss a trick there, because as you were saying, if you do invest in your leaders and help them understand their style, what's needed and what's needed from them in the future, and just take some time off the treadmill to reevaluate, and then before you get back on it, really is a worthwhile investment. I think leaders themselves have to sort of accept that they don't have to have all the answers as well. So when you do start a lot of expectation, I think it is about recognizing that the leader as an individual hasn't got all the answers. It's about utilizing the team that's around them and all the skills that are there. It's about setting the right environment. So, for example, when I joined Wipro, I did this. I sort of got the team together. I actually said, look, I don't have all the answers. These first couple of weeks, tell me, one-to-ones, tell me what you think the problems are, what do we need to address? And then we can kind of take it from there and sort of build that team cohesion. So, and also I think that takes the pressure off the leader to have all the answers all the time.
What is Wipro currently doing to upskill leaders in their teams?
There's quite a few areas that Wipro are doing to help invest in their people. I'll talk about a personal example first, which I've been fortunate to be a part of, which is this senior leadership apprentice scheme via the Henley Business School. So Wipro has partnered with Henley Business School, and I've been part of a cohort that has worked with Henley over, it's actually been 21 months. I've just finished it. It's been exhausting, but great at the same time, where we covered 7 modules of leadership, including things like innovative leadership, leadership through uncertainty, inclusive leadership, financial leadership. So it was a very all-encompassing course that was kind of 5% theory and 95% practical. So these 7 modules were distributed over 3 months. And those 3 months started with a day at Henley Business School where we learned theory, cohort diverse, and we were mixed in with from other companies and sectors as well. So it wasn't just a Wipro thing. We would learn about VUCA leadership, for example, and then come back to the workplace and have to do a work-based project in those 3 months. So if you can imagine, over the 7 3-month modules of 5% theory, 95% work-based project, it was absolutely fantastic. Also, it brought our cohort of Wipro people from all over different sectors and functions together, and as a really strong team. So that's one area, this senior leadership apprentice that Wipro has invested in, that's been really good. The other hot topic is AI, and Wipro launched an AI, what we call AI 360 last year. Believe it or not, Wipro's about 230,000 people globally, and 220 odd thousand of those have gone through the Gen AI fundamentals training.
Wow.
And 30,000 of those have completed advanced levels of training. So really good training. We've also got highly personalized and contextualized training programs for people. So it's tailored for skill sets and domains. And it's divided into 3 sections. So next generation associates, which is what we call graduates, the middle management, and executive leadership. It's segmented depending on the needs of those groups. And then there's talent learning pathways for developers, engineers, architects, SMEs. Obviously, Wipro's got a huge number of those type of roles. And then lastly, this is really interesting, an AI-powered talent marketplace. So this is what we're starting to implement now. So it's around career paths for employees. So you set out kind of the career path you would like to have with your skills and the skills you're developing, and then it matches it with opportunities within the company. So employees can feel like they've got a good pathway and a direction ahead, and easy to understand what skills they need to develop to get to the role they want to get to. Really exciting times.
What a brilliant tool that is. You've got people in their early stage careers who don't necessarily know what they might be good at or where they want to begin, but they know where they want to end. Having almost an AI counselor on their shoulder to navigate that journey for them, that's a fantastic initiative. Looking forward, given evolving business landscape and technological advancements, what do you believe will be the most critical skill or focus area for leaders over the next 5 years? And how should organizations measure the success of their leadership development program?
Yeah, I mean, it's tempting here to, from what we've spoken about, Alex, to sort of give a long list of about 25 things, isn't it? Because it's so sort of broad. But if I get those critical skills, maybe give you 5. So 1, resilience. I think that's probably come through in our conversation. 2, growth mindset. So really being adaptable, positive, thinking ahead, and recognizing that each of us is not the finished article. We're never going to be the finished article, and we've got to keep learning and developing to stay current. 3rd is adaptable. 4th, obviously, AI. I've really started using AI myself probably every day now. In fact, my kids keep saying to me, "Oh, Dad, don't just keep saying, oh, chat GPT it." And I think the more we as leaders use it every day for all sorts of different things, and there's plenty of work applications for it, the more familiar we become, and then with the more credible we are with our teams. And then the 5th one, relationship building. I see sometimes that gets a bit lost in the world of multiple RFP responses and then trying to win work, then winning work, then delivering, and getting quite consumed about the deliverables and the timescales, and sometimes neglecting the relationship building that we all need to do at all levels with our clients and our own teams. So I think that's really important. Measuring success. Look at this. If you're putting in place a leadership development program for your team, how would you measure how successful that is? And in terms of like return on investment, I think there are 2 key areas. It's 1, if you invest in your leaders, you will very likely reduce the attrition rate. People won't look because they're getting what they need from the organization they're in. So obviously that's not good news for you, Alex, but reduces recruitment fees cost. The second ROI area is around productivity. And there's some really, if people haven't looked at it, they should look at the Gallup website, because there's some fantastic, extensive research going back 30, 40 years on the workplace. They do every 2 years, they do a survey on the workplace, and it's a fantastic resource. And you can really look at productivity. So you can actually relate leadership engagement with productivity, which therefore links to revenue and sales. I believe you can measure an increase in kind of revenue and sales by putting in place a leadership development program. You can measure that. And of course, other slightly longer term measures, 1 would be employee engagement surveys or any pulse surveys, tracking promotion of those people that you've put on the leadership development program. Over time, you'll get a good database and should see how well that's going. And people feel motivated when they are being developed, and then they're motivated to think a bit more outside the box, in my opinion. So things like innovation and thought leadership. If you're motivated at work and you see a client challenge, and you might say to yourself, how could AI improve that client challenge? What could we do to make life a bit easier for them? Then that can actually lead to innovation, thought leadership articles, white papers, and more innovative offerings that leaders can take. So I personally a big advocate of investment in leadership development programs, partly because I've benefited it from myself, and I can see that. But I've seen it across multiple organizations and peers and colleagues that I've worked with, and how they've grown when they have had the opportunity to go on leadership development programs.
That probably brings us to a natural conclusion, Mike. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us today. I always appreciate your time. I always appreciate your insights. On behalf of all of us at the Barton Partnership, we wish both you and Wipro every success for the remainder of 2024 and beyond.
Thank you so much, Alex. I really enjoyed it.
Great to speak. Thanks a lot.